We've seen it really starting to develop over the last few years, but now it's gotten as bad as it's ever been. Unless a team is playing in a college football playoff game, it seems that nearly every draft-eligible player is opting to sit out of their team's bowl game to begin preparing for the NFL draft. And I just don't think it's good for college football at all. Before we get to today's video, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to the channel. If you're watching this video, it means you're likely a pretty big college football fan. And it also means that you're likely not subscribed, so make sure to join the best college football community here on YouTube. Also, if you could take a second and give this video a thumbs up, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps the algorithm of the video and helps share it with more college football fans. So I wanted to make this video just to express my thoughts on the entire situation currently going on in college football. Feel free to share your thoughts down below in the comment section because I'm sure everyone has different opinions on the subject. I wasn't planning on making this video, but there were a couple of opt-outs that really stood out to me yesterday. It was when I found out that both Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are going to be skipping the Rose Bowl for Ohio State. Now, I know the Buckeyes didn't make the playoffs this year, so playing in any other bowl game is pretty much meaningless to these guys. They're both likely going to be first-round picks, so it's not surprising that they're going to declare and skip the game. Had this been any other bowl game, I would totally understand it. But this is the Rose Bowl we're talking about. This is the biggest bowl game that's not a playoff game. And you can argue it's nearly as big of a deal. Every college football player dreams of competing for a championship. But if they're not, the next best thing is playing in the Rose Bowl. I know that over the years, bowl games have become less special, but I think every Pac-12 and Big Ten fan that's watching this video can agree with me that the Rose Bowl is still a massive deal. Seeing those two guys opt out of the game really surprised me, and it just goes to show the road we're going down is going to get significantly worse. Now, I will say this so I don't sound like an old man that's yelling "get off my lawn." I totally understand why a player would opt out of a bowl game if they're declaring for the NFL draft. I understand not wanting to risk injury and taking a chance of hurting your draft stock. If you're projected to go in the first round or maybe the second round and you're expected to sign for millions of dollars, I get maybe not wanting to play one more game where you could potentially throw that all away. But with that being said, things are just really getting out of hand. I know you can look at players like Jalen Smith from Notre Dame a few years back, who was projected to be a top 10 pick, and an injury pretty much derailed his NFL career. But I can't think of too many examples of a player that was projected to be a first round pick that played in their bowl game, got hurt, and pretty much ruined their NFL career. Again, I get it, you can make an example out of Jalen Smith, but there aren't a whole lot of guys that immediately come to mind because it's such a rare thing. Well, especially with nowadays that players essentially skip every bowl game imaginable. But even then, I've been trying to think about the last 5 to 10 years when there was a player that going into the season was projected to be a first round pick and they suffered an injury during the season that hurt their draft stock. It just doesn't seem to happen, and this idea that you're risking injury just seems blown out of proportion to me. Unless your team is one of the 4 teams in the college football playoff, it seems like nearly every draft eligible prospect is sitting out. Nowadays, it seems like breaking news if a player actually decides to play in their bowl game. Like, you have to take a second and go, is this guy being serious? Why is he playing in his bowl game instead of opting for the NFL draft? About a week ago, Mike Leach gave his thoughts on the topic, and I thought I'd share some of the quotes that he had to say. You've got an obligation to the place that helped build and develop you and finish it out in the bowl. That's part of it. You owe it to your team. You owe it to your fans, you owe it to your coaches, and it's the most bizarre thing in the world to me. Somebody says, well, I can't play one more game. They think they're going to have a storied 10-year NFL career, and they can't play one more college game. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, guys will go to the NFL, they'll make the Pro Bowl, and they'll play in the Pro Bowl. It's one of the biggest absurdities that I've ever seen. And it's selfish too. The NFL generally gives them the same advice. If you're the NFL, you don't care if anybody comes out early. Why would you care? Because if you're good enough to play in that league, you're going to play there anyway. And then the more reps you have, the more games you've played, the more polished you are. The better shot you have at making the team, and the better chance the NFL has of realizing their investment that they've put into these guys. A specific team might want some position and think if it'll sequence for them. May want a player here or there to come out because they're in a position to get them. But the league as a whole, well, if you're good enough to play in that league, they're going to get you anyway. And the better you are, the more skills you'll develop, the better your chances to make the team. Now, there are certainly a bunch of quotes to take in there from Mike Leach. Now, he does make some valid points, but I can see why people are likely going to disagree with what he says. And I also can see why people are going to agree with what he says. Here's the thing. These players have earned the right to make whatever decision they feel is best for their career. If it means skipping a bowl game, they have every right to do so. I don't think they owe anything to the team or the coaching staff, especially nowadays when coaches are leaving programs left and right. So if a coach can just Lincoln Riley or Brian Kelly it and get out of their school, then why can't a player? Now, if I was a player who was projected to go in the first round, I would likely consider whether or not it was worth it to skip my bowl game. Now, if my team was playing in the Cheez-It Bowl or something like that, I would totally get it more. But if I'm in the Rose Bowl, you better believe I'm playing. But then again, I'm not a player facing millions of dollars, so that's an easy thing for me to say. From a fan's perspective, it absolutely sucks. Pretty much every bowl game now is meaningless. If there's a great matchup between two great teams, odds are that the best players won't be playing unless they're freshmen or sophomores. One example is the Peach Bowl featuring Pittsburgh and Michigan State. Now, when I saw that matchup initially, it was one of the games that I had circled. It would have been an awesome and exciting game featuring Kenny Pickett and Kenneth Walker, two of the best players in all of college football. Instead, both players opted out. Now, who really cares about that game? I get it, if you're a Pittsburgh or a Michigan State fan, you'll still be watching, but for a lot of college football fans, a lot of our interest from that game initially is now gone. What about Arkansas versus Penn State? Two of the best wide receivers in the country in Treylon Burks and Jahan Dotson. Well, they both opted out. Now, I've lost interest. Now, obviously, I'm still going to try to watch as many bowl games as I can, as will many other people in the country, but significantly less people are going to tune in if the biggest stars aren't playing. The best part about bowl season is seeing teams face each other in matchups that we rarely see. But now, those matchups are likely going to be missing the best players, which is just something that's not great for the game of football. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I truly don't think this is anything that can be fixed. The only way there's any hope for this is with an expanded playoff. At least by adding a couple more teams to the mix, we'll get a few more players that won't opt out of their game. All of a sudden, the Rose Bowl and the Peach Bowl and a few other games are going to have meaning, and we'll see the top players play in those games. Especially if the playoff is able to get to 12 teams, then this won't be something we have to worry about just as much. But even if that's the case, what happens if there's a future #1 overall pick and his team is in the Holiday Bowl or the Gasparilla Bowl? He certainly won't play in that game, so it isn't necessarily fixing anything by expanding the playoff. It's only going to prevent a few extra players. I saw some people suggesting giving top players NIL deals for these bowl games, adding incentive for them to play. But even then, if they were offered, let's say, $250,000 to appear in the bowl game, would they? They're likely going to be signing a contract for millions of dollars in the NFL, so I don't think $250,000 would change their mind at all. Even if you made it $500,000, I don't think these top guys are going to be taking that. Maybe a player or two might accept that deal, but I don't think offering players NIL deals will make much of a difference or any difference at all. Now, I've spent all of this video talking about players that don't appear in bowl games because of the NFL draft. But something I haven't even brought up is all the players who don't play because of the transfer portal as well. I don't have all the names in front of me, but it seems like 25% of players in college football are currently in the transfer portal or have already transferred to a brand new school. Now, I know that number is being dramatic and it's probably less than 1%, but my point is a lot of schools are having 5 to 10 players transferring right when the season ends, including some really big names. So, we're not seeing them in bowl games either. I think this is going to be another trend that continues to grow. Sure, once playoff expansion happens, we're going to see a little less, but the second the season ends, these players are leaving their teams. We've seen a number of teams cancel their bowl games because of COVID, but a reason for that is also them being down a number of players who have transferred. Yeah, they're having 15 to 20 players who might not be able to play because of COVID, but a lot of these teams have 5 to 10, maybe even 15 players that aren't there anymore because they entered the transfer portal. It's just going to continue and likely get worse every year. After rambling for the last 10 minutes or so, I'm not sure whether or not I sound like an old person yelling at people to get off my lawn, just like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. If I sound like that, I apologize, it's not my intention. Like I mentioned, I totally understand players doing this. I understand players saving your draft stock and entering the transfer portal. The point of this video was just to talk about how bowl games have become so meaningless, and I think it's only going to get worse. I miss the days when bowl games meant something, and I'm only 25 years old. I didn't get to experience the good days of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, so I can only imagine how people older than me feel. Now I'm actually really starting to sound like someone yelling to get off my lawn. But I miss the days when winning a bowl game was a huge deal. I miss the days when going to a bowl game was a huge deal. Unfortunately, that's just not the reality of college football anymore, and again, I think it's going to get significantly worse from here on out. So, after all I've said, what are your guys' thoughts on bowl games and what they've turned into? Do you think that players should be opting out or transferring as frequent as they have been? Do you think that there's any way that we can save bowl games? Whatever your thoughts are on all the topics I discussed today, let me know in the comment section down below, as I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to the channel. If you love college football, then this is definitely the place for you. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you all in my next video.